One. Good morning and welcome to What's Up Doc. I'm your host, Doc Durden. We're filming from the Nevada. 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to What's Up Doc. We're filming today from Virginia, Nevada studios, right here in Virginia City. We're in the Durden building, and boy, do we have a special guest today. And he's made quite an impression up here on Main Street in Virginia City. He has his own show coming up in August, and that's called the Buffalo Bill Wild West Show out there in Menden at the Dangberg Ranch. And of course, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Wild Bill Hickok himself. No. 3, 2, 1. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Buffalo Bill Cody himself, one of the most famous historical characters in one of the most famous historical characters in our American history. Welcome, Buffalo Bill Cody.
Well, thank you for having me, Doc.
It's
a pleasure.
So pleased that you're here.
Well,
Absolutely.
It's good to be here.
Boy, what a character you are. And let me tell you, first of all, I'm going to ask you before we get into your character as Buffalo Bill Cody, and that's quite a road to hoe in itself. But you carry this off brilliantly. First off, did you grow up close by?
No, I didn't. Actually, I grew up in Ohio.
Ohio, okay.
Yeah, just short of Cleveland, which was about 280 miles from where my character was born in LeClaire, Iowa.
Oh, isn't that something?
Well, actually, closer to 400 miles.
Close to 400 miles,
Yeah.
And that's where you grew up.
Absolutely.
That's kind of cool. And,
Absolutely.
and back then, you had no clue that today you'd be Buffalo Bill Cody.
No, my ambition was to be a cowboy. I was going to put a roof on my tricycle and ride to Texas and herd cattle and shoot bad guys.
Yeah.
That was my ambition.
Well, I think
until I met you.
Yeah, well, and we'll certainly get to that. But move on real quickly. You're a veteran of the United States of America. You spent your time in the Navy?
No, sir. Like Cody, I was in the Army. He was in the Quartermaster Corps originally.
Well, okay, let me stop you right there. I don't know where I got that from, but anyway. So, 3, 2, 1. And also, you're a vet, and you were in the Army of this here United States of America.
That is correct.
Yes.
Absolutely. 3 years. I did tour overseas, and I had my first daughter when I was in the service, and it was a great experience, but it was even greater leaving.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, but you had actually you had quite a career. You were some sort of security in the Army, were you not?
I was military police.
Military police.
And a unit small arms armorer. I was the number 2 gunner on the 2nd Modus, or the M2 50 caliber for the unit, and I was also that pretty much covers it.
Yeah.
A unit small arms armor. I think I mentioned that. So I even did a stint as the mail clerk.
A mail clerk. Yeah.
Right. I had a job after duty hours playing at the NCO open mess. There was a bar underneath an MP station, and I used to do old rock and roll as a DJ there and put on dances, and we had a great time, made a lot of great friends, had a lot of experience, got to meet a lot of the local people and nationals, and it was a good time.
And that's exactly where we're going next. Before we go there, though, I do want to thank you for your service, as well as our audience. it's incredible. Anybody that spent time in the services, and I do personally thank you. But leap forward. Now you did talk about a little bit of DJing, and this is where you had a career after. Well, you went to work for several people after the service, but what's interesting. Not saying that your work wasn't interesting, but which it was. But since you did touch upon your DJing, you did that for a long time locally here.
Approximately 20 years.
20 years of DJing.
Right. I did announcing, music, and entertainment, primarily for car shows, but we put on dances, sock hops, things of that nature, charity events. Wherever they needed music, and I would show up and play the music that I loved the most, about as loud as I could stand it for 4, 6, 8 hours. It was a good time.
Yeah, yeah, and this was local. This was like in
primarily Northern California,
yeah.
Nevada. That was my area.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah. And wherever a car show happened to be, that kind of brought you there.
Have money, will travel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what was some of your biggest events, the ones that you most enjoyed? Okay, how about the biggest paying event?
The biggest paying event was actually getting paid for 1.5, almost 2 days there at the Carson City Silver Dollar.
Okay,
because
Carson,
I would do.
yeah.
They would have a gathering before the main event, like on Friday, and I would do the music at a major restaurant there on the main drag, and then all day at the park, and then the next day up until the award ceremonies, and then go home. And that was probably, I was well compensated everywhere I went.
Yes.
Because of the duration. I made more money at that event.
Yeah.
And the Rio Vista in California, down by the river, and
Been there.
down in there,
Yeah.
and coincidental to the fishing derby that was going on.
Yeah.
So they'd have really quite a large event and showing of many cars, and a lot of the same people that would be coming up to Douglas County in Nevada, and I would see them there, or any other show that I was hired to do the music. The car show fraternity is fluid, but it's really close-knit, and you get to know a lot of these people, and every 3 or 4 years there's a group of them that would have a new car.
Yep.
And there was always a new project going on, or always bringing your favorite back. Met a lot of great people, and that's some that I'm still friends with today, and begged me to come back and do more music. But
That's great to meet friends along the way.
absolutely.
And you still have them to this day as friends. How cool is that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you did that for 20 years. Now your favorite. Now on the Carson area, you got paid the most, and now your favorite event. Where would that be?
Well, I belonged to the Valley Cruisers and I was one of the co-founders, helped write the charter for the club, and doing our own event. Again, that was a 2-day event, if you will, Friday, Saturday, and most of Sunday. And I donated my talents to the club because a lot of the money that they received from entry fees, etc., not only did it go to awards for the participants, but the Valley Cruisers donated to a lot of the local charities, Head Start programs for the senior citizens. One time there was a senior home that didn't have televisions, so we helped donate towards. We couldn't buy TV for every room, but we helped pay for the installation of the cables and the hookups and
I got you.
television mounts.
Yeah.
So we did a lot in the club community with a club of about 60 members. So
Yeah.
we generated a lot. One time, the Chamber of Commerce mentioned that we brought in more than Candy Dance. to the community.
Now that's saying something. The Candy Dance, that's a huge event, and they bring in a lot of money for
Right.
that.
Well, our short event would bring in $250 to $300,000
That is remarkable.
in that just those 2 days.
That is remarkable.
It is.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
No clue.
Phenomenal amount of money was pumped into the community. Limited amount of places to stay. There was a Carson Valley Inn and a couple of motels, 3 or so motels. So people were staying in Carson City, and people were driving in from Winnemucca and Fallon and Yarrington and points east and points west. So we had to limit the show. It was a very limited, because we can only park 250 cars. So it became kind of an elitist. I shouldn't say elitist, that gives the wrong impression.
First come, first serve.
It was, yes, it was a very desirable, and when you consider we would have people that showed up for almost all 22 years that we put on shows against the biggest car show in California, Pleasanton.
Oh, you know, I've been to Pleasanton, and huge.
It's huge.
Huge.
And we would draw people they would prefer to come and sit in the middle of Douglas County at Lampe Park and surrounded by the mountains and the trees.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious to watch they all looked when the geese started to fly over, because they would bomb the cars and those paint jobs. They'd be out there rubbing on those cars, making them real shiny and pretty, protecting those $30,000 paint jobs on those cars.
Yeah.
And that's hard to imagine, because most of the cars I ever drove, even the cars I had in the car shows, didn't equal $30,000, and some of these guys had $30,000 paint jobs, the kind that shift color in the sunlight.
$30,000 paint job. Can
Yeah.
you imagine? It's hard for me to imagine.
That would be the most, and not everybody in the show
Sure.
had that.
Yeah,
but there would be at least 3, 4, 5 people.
Yeah.
One year, it was interesting. There was a car, and it looked like a bloated pedal car, and it was made in France. And it was they had about 60 of them on a ship that were going to be, and that was practically the whole year's production in 1914. And the ship got sunk by a German submarine because it was the beginning of World War I. Well, there was one car that didn't make the ship, and this fella came to our show for about 3 years, and he trailered this little car, and he'd drive it around the car show and letting people see it. It was the only car in existence of that manufacturing type, because the war pretty much killed that company.
Sure.
No war contracts, or they got taken up making armaments, whatever.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, we had a lot of unique automobiles for as small a show, limited to 250 cars. People would reserve a space even if they couldn't come. So sometimes, I think we averaged more like 220, 225 cars, but we had space for 250. People would pay with every hopes and intent to make it,
Sure.
but sometimes they couldn't, but they never asked for their money back, and they knew it was for a good cause.
Right.
Car
right.
show people are really good. We used to put trash cans out. Give you an idea. We'd put trash cans out to make it easy and accessible so there would be no litter, because one of our things we had to do after every show, our agreement with the Parks District was that we would police up and clean up the park. We would everybody would bring their plastic garbage can. We'd have about 8, 10 of them out there. And when all the cars left, that field would be spotless.
Spotless.
Nobody-
Nothing. No debris.
No hot dog
No litter.
wrappers, no popcorn bags, no plastic cups. Occasionally, this year or that, you might find a napkin or two. But did it come from the car show, or did it come from us in the pavilion?
Sure.
And blew out there into the field. But
Yeah.
I am very proud to have been able to participate
Yeah.
so extensively in Douglas County and with the Valley Cruisers, which I don't believe exist at this point. We aged out. It's harder and harder to get newer and younger people interested in the cars pre-1969.
Okay.
They're out there, but it's harder and harder to
It's
acquire
hard.
those
Sure.
cars.
Yeah.
And they don't have the interest. Their knowledge is Nissan and Honda. And like in our day, when you could buy a 1950s car for $200 or less. I bought cars for $50 that
Yeah.
ran.
Yeah, right.
I remember 55 Chevys in 1964 with hot rodded engines and a little bit of custom work and plum purple paint job. $300 in the newspaper. Yeah.
Yeah,
The guy had more than $300 in wheels and tires
yeah,
in the
right,
car.
yeah.
They'd be selling these cars, but those days are gone, and even the young hot rodders today, it's hard to get a runner for $2,000.
Oh.
$1,500, $2,000.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's interesting what you're just saying. It was just yesterday I was watching on TV. It was a barn find. It was a '66 Mustang 350. So what would that be?
That'd be a 350. A 66 with a 350.
Not a Cobra 350.
Could have been a GT, but
GT. It was a GT 350, and it's been sitting like 40 years, and so they sold it at auction just as is. I mean, it was rough, but they had a lot of stuff. Everything was there. It was rough. $140,000.
No, I'm thinking it wasn't a GT. It must have been some other special limited run.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, and the interesting note on barn finds, you don't even clean the pigeon poop off them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
run them as they
As
were
is,
found,
right,
and
exactly.
those cars
Right.
should be all original
Yeah.
as parked. And that's crazy.
Yeah. I still had a badge underneath the hood. 350. I'm just trying to think of what it was. Cobra 350 or
Well, it'd be
was it
like I say, a 351 is Ford.
no, it was a 350.
If
whatever.
it was a 350, then
Yeah.
you really do have a special production run car. I'm not familiar with Mustang in NASCAR, but to qualify for certain types of races and associations, the manufacturer had to sell at least 500 cars to the public.
Okay, right. Yeah,
So if this particular car had a 350, it's like Chevy had a 302. They had a Camaro with a 302, whereas that was not a Chevy engine. It would be 289 or 327.
yeah. Right.
But there was, my friend had a 68 or 9, and it was a 302.
302. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and you talk about that kind of money. I had a 55 Ford panel truck with a 390, and it could get up and go, but it would pass everything but a gas station.
Yeah. Now you just sold.
I sold that baby.
Yeah,
Yes, I
just
did.
stole it recently. Yeah.
Buffalo Bill needed some new guns.
Yeah. Now, okay. I thought I had to get into the DJing because I thought that was a very interesting career that you had for the last 20 years DJing. I've been to a whole bunch of car shows and I've seen the DJs, and they're having a good time and they're spinning the records and you add so much to the car show with the
You
music
really
and
can.
everything,
You
and the type of music. You're always playing the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and of course that's my favorite.
It's so gratifying. You put a tune on now, and I named my business Time Warp Music. And you have all these old cars out there in the field. You have people, a lot of them would dress, period. Of course, it was a very simple costume. Men, white T-shirts,
Sure.
cigarettes rolled up in
Yeah.
the shirt
Hey,
sleeve,
pants.
peg
Cuff.
jeans, and
Yeah.
Wellington boots or
Yeah.
sneakers, black Converse, and boy, you had your costume. But to play a song that somebody remembered, and they're bopping to the music,
Yeah.
and the ladies are
Oh, yeah,
sashaying.
yeah.
It was a real joy. It was
Yep. Yeah.
And there was one gal I used to pick on a lot. She's still in the valley. She's actually writing a book about her experiences. She, hands-on, other than laying the paint, she had a 60-ish Jaguar, and she fixed it up to Concours level, and even showed it in Concours, where they have very strict judging and authenticity. She did everything but the paint, and I used to pick on her unmercifully. She was one of the few that would come to the show, put a pop-up over her car. Well, I started telling people, Oh yeah, as you walk around and enjoy the cars, don't go see Lois's Jaguar over there. It is the only kit Jaguar you will find with an international engine. And people, and it wasn't. It was you would never fit an international engine in a low slung chassis of a
Not gonna
Jaguar.
happen, huh?
But all these people, that's amazing. They have kit cars for Jaguars now. And she'd get mad at me in a fun way. But
Yeah.
we used to roll with that for 4 or 5 years, and at other shows, because she would always show up wherever I was doing music. There was Lois, So again, it's a good fraternity, good people, a lot of fun, and the music was just right on.
Excellent. Hold that thought right there. I didn't put this light on, and I got a dark side. For Christ's sakes.
You get so much light from that door, you think you have.
Yeah, I thought I was okay, but let me just put on this side here. That's better. Okay. All right, so 3, 2, 1. Yeah, always, and loved the car shows, and I loved what you did. Now we're going to leapfrog a little bit forward here, and we're going to start on Buffalo Bill Cody. How in the heck did that come about?
Well, I guess that's the end of the discussion. It came about because of you.
Me.
You are the guilty
I
party.
want you to listen now. I want you to listen up. His character started with me. All
He
right,
is
go ahead.
responsible. I was up at the visitor center with a friend who was visiting from Tennessee, and that day in particular, I had shorter hair, barely touched the tops of my ears, touched the collar of my shirt. I had just retired from the state of Nevada, and I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I had a little mustache, went into a little chin whiskers, and Hawaiian shirt, shorts, and sandals. And my partner and I were talking, and here comes this big gentleman over here to my left, and I had asked him a question. We were talking general. He came up, introduced himself, and well, before we get to what we were talking about, he comes up to me and he gets in my space. And if you've ever seen Doc is not a pygmy. He's kind of a tall drink of water here, and he's in my, and he's looking at me, and I'm going, oh man, I don't know. And he says, I see Buffalo Bill. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what he was getting at, and conversation evolved, and I had told him I was interested in cowboy action shooting. He was asking me about my interests, and I said I wanted to go on the road in the circuit because I had shot in competition in the service with pistols, and so I was going to do that. My wife was going to make 3-in-1 dolls, Little Red Riding Hood and Granny on the back when you switch the bonnet, pull the dress up, and well, it was 3 different dolls in one doll. And she was going to market those, and I was going to shoot in cowboy action shooting. This gentleman turned my whole world around. He says, you look like Buffalo Bill. You ought to do Buffalo Bill up here. And I had no inclination, no desire, since I was maybe 8, 9 years old, to be a cowboy or dress up a cowboy or a plainsman or a scout or Army man, because my interest had evolved to the Civil War. So, but I never thought of doing anything like that. And my growing up in the '60s, I had this revisionist history forced upon us in those days that all our heroes were bunk and they were drunks or they weren't real or they were exaggerations. And Buffalo Bill was an alcoholic, which maybe, and nothing that they did was true. But Doc's insistence replanted the seed in my head. I studied Buffalo Bill for 6 to 8 months before I'd commit or even just intend to do that and become Buffalo Bill. But I studied and I studied and I had to cross-reference, and I was getting Dick Tracy with it and somewhat absorbed with it. But when I found out that Buffalo Bill won the Medal of Honor, this is a real deal. This is not a fellow that was an exaggeration or didn't do what he said he did. And even all his friends and diary entries and such and reminiscence or people passed down from families, generations that knew Buffalo Bill said he was a showman. He knew promotion, but when it came to talking about his own deeds and whatever, he was not a braggart. It was not in most men's psyche in those days to brag. That wasn't their deal. Usually if there was a braggart, it was the guy that didn't do anything. And I liken it to like the people, our fathers that came back from World War II. They didn't talk about their events. They didn't brag about their events. Sometimes over a poker game and they'd have a few drinks, some of the war stories would come out, but there was usually no brag, and it was always about some humorous event or something that would make everybody go somber for a moment. But I studied Buffalo Bill, realized and felt he was the real deal, and if I could, and I think it made me a better person, trying to live up to the way he was. He had made a comment that rather than piling up and accumulating money, he would rather be known as a man that did good for humanity and was good to his family and friends. So now that's a mark of a
Yes.
man. That is
Yes.
a mark of a man.
Yes.
And so many things that he was so ahead of his time. He advocated for women's rights. He believed women should have the right to vote. Was highly unpopular.
Yes.
Predating the Marshall Plan in World War II, where we helped rebuild our enemies. He was he fought the Indians. He was pragmatic about it. There was a clash of cultures, but after the Indians were placed on reservations, he became an advocate for the Indians. In his Wild West, never called it a show, by the way, he paid the Indians the same amount for whatever they did that was equal to the white man. There was no
Equal opportunity here,
absolutely.
and he never called it a show. Now
No.
that's interesting.
It was, if anything, it was called Buffalo Bill's Wild West Exhibition. And Buffalo Bill intended what he was showing the public was the disappearing of the West and what he had experienced. And it was meant to be educational in his mind. If it was entertaining and the idea was entertainment, that was what he was trying to do. So to him, it cheapened the concept to call it a show. He performed a show on stage for 10 years, but when it became Buffalo Bill's Wild West, he never used the word show. And it's difficult to talk about what he did without calling it a show. I fall into that trap myself.
But you know, now that you mentioned expedition, I've seen that on posters.
Absolutely.
I've seen that on posters. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And getting on the thing about being ahead of us, to have Indians perform. Now, he could have hired for 50 cents a day any town he went to people to portray Indians, but he wanted the real deal. And again, the idea that they've been defeated, whatever, give them the helping hand, give them recognition and respect. he had to pay the Bureau of Indian Affairs $300 per individual. Didn't matter if it was a youth, woman, or man. He had to pay Bureau of Indian Affairs $300 for the right to use Indians in his performances.
Wow.
Non-refundable.
Huge amount of money back then.
You're talking probably close to $10,000.
$10,000
Today's
today's
money.
money.
And then he had to, well, besides paying them equal pay for equal work, he also had to ensure from the BIA that half of the salary was forwarded to that individual's family back on the reservation. And by a certain date, he had to have them back at the reservation in a new suit of clothes. So he had a major investment, and at the highest number, he had 600 people working for him, and 80 of them were Indians.
600 people on staff. This is going back to the late 1800s, and 80 of them were Indians.
Yeah, at the most 60 to 80. 60 was the average, but he had up to 80 Indians, and he had Sitting Bull with him for 2 years, and went to Europe with Buffalo Bill. And newspaper reporter, and I'm not sure of the incidents if it was in front of Buffalo Bill or Sitting Bull. The reporter said, "This guy's Custer's killer. How can you have him here?" And Sitting Bull was being paid second only to Buffalo Bill himself.
Huge amount of money.
Huge amount of money. Well, the reporter says, "How could you do this? Custer killer." And he said, "He was once my enemy, now he's my friend. The Indian hasn't done anything any red-blooded American would do. Fight for his land, fight
Sure.
for his way of life,
Absolutely,
fight for his
sure.
family."
Yeah.
And again, that was the amount of respect. And even after Wounded Knee, he was asked by the Department of Military in Washington to go and help calm and settle the Indians, because they had respect for him too, even though he'd been an enemy, who they called Pahashka, which means long-haired one.
Pahashka.
Pahashka, you bet. And Wasika Pahashka, which is white man with long hair,
Okay.
long-haired white man. And but the young soldiers at the site wouldn't allow him near or across onto the reservation land. And at Buffalo Bill's own expense, he had outfitted 4 wagons with blankets, food, toys, candy for the kids, because it was in winter time, and these people needed help, and he knew the way of the Indian, even though they'd been on reservations now since basically the 1880s. That he did his best for them, and these young troopers didn't have the respect or knowledge of who Buffalo Bill was. He's just an old man. He hasn't scouted for years, so they didn't show him the respect, and it also hindered Native American and government and white people relations with the Sioux tribes.
Sure.
Just because of the intractability of some officers that remembered their daddies talking about the good old days, and this was their last wahoo, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah. And this, incredible history that Buffalo Bill Cody had, and still being remembered today, especially in the West. We have a little bit of different history here in the West than we do in the East. That brings me into the picture as my character, and actually my character is Wild Bill Hickok. And during the day, we were friends. We were actually friends, and I was older than Buffalo Bill Cody, but he looked up to me. I started out actually friends of the family, right? Friends of your family.
we became friends after I met Wild Bill working for the Pony Express. Wild Bill came to my defense I was a mere lad of 14, going on 15, big youth for my age, and Russell Majors and Waddell, the company that had the Pony Express. Russell in particular was considerate of me and my family's plight when my father died. So for 8 years off and on, I worked for that outfit. Well, there was a gentleman at one of these sites where we were building or improving a Pony Express station, and he was a drunkard, and he liked batting me around because he thought I was an easy mark. And you used to come by with supplies, building supplies, stuck it out on the prairie. There aren't a whole lot of trees, and even though we used a lot of sod, you needed poles and such for the roof, and so other materials that were necessary. That was your job to bring them to the site, and you saw what was going on because you had a couple of days before you turned around, had to go back, get more supplies, go to another station. And so you'd help out, and you saw what was going on, and it kind of frosted you just a tad, and you saw I was boiling up. And is that the meeting?
We are in Virginia City, and you can hear the steamer right now, and the chugging. That is so cool. All right.
Heck, and I thought that was the dinner bell for lunch.
No, we're fortunate that we're about what, maybe 100 yards or so from well, actually from the train depot. We're a couple hundred yards from the train depot. But yeah, how cool is that? So
Absolutely.
So continue on, Buffalo Bill Cody.
You saw what was going on. You didn't want to see me get in over my head. Your sense of right and wrong, you stood up for me and you thoroughly thrashed. Again, I mean, Wild Bill, Doc is a gentle soul. Thoroughly thrashed this gentleman that was harassing me.
I beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, thank you very much. I didn't know what we were allowed to say. I didn't want to bring the prairie speech out to the Doc's show here. We can't call this a show, right?
Yep.
And anyhow, you thoroughly thrashed, beat the hell out of him. I'm paraphrasing you. And we became fast friends. And when the Pony Express, unfortunately for us, folded, and for a short time, you kept working for Russell Majors and Waddell, hauling supplies to now the Overland Stage Company, which I drove stage at 14, 15 years old. I drove the stagecoach for a short period of time. Yeah. And when I realized that was not my career, I convinced you and another individual that was more my age to go back to Kansas, to the Salt Creek area, and I introduced you to my family and sisters. And your family was much further east, and I don't remember if you still had connections or communications with them, but you were adopted by our family, and we became, literally family friends.
Yes. Yeah.
And a short time afterwards, Civil War came. You joined up right away. I was the only head of the house, male at home, with 5 sisters and a younger brother, much younger brother, that mother wouldn't allow me to join up. Mm-hmm. I got around, like most young people and rebellious, I got around mother a little bit by I rode with the Jayhawkers and the Redlegs going up to Missouri to steal back horses that them Secesh people were stealing from us, and we might have picked a few up extra as interest.
Sure, absolutely.
And
Spoils of war.
Occasionally, to make things more sporting, usually a few shots were traded in the dark. Luckily, marksmanship was pathetically poor, and my mother convinced me what I was doing was still stealing, and it was up to the law to retrieve these horses, whatever. I couldn't convince her that, mother, this was war and this. But she said, when I'm 18, I can enlist. Well, I had to quit jayhawking, and there for a year or so I was a peaceful gentleman there on the little bit of land that we had, helping support my sisters and mother, whose health was failing. And just before my 18th birthday, she passed away, unfortunately. So in 1864, I joined up and followed your footsteps in a way. You started off being a mule skinner for
Yep.
the Army, driving wagons and supplies, and then eventually you became a scout, which is a euphemism for a spy. Now, how this fella at 6'4", when the average man was 5'5", 5'6", how in the world he could scout and get around without being noticed? But one time he even had the Rebs convinced that he was a lieutenant in the Southern Army, and that kind of fit because most of the officers, or a good number of the officers of the Southern Army, came from aristocracy. They were better fed, they were taller. You read much of the biographies of these gentlemen, they were 6'1", 6'2". So it's amazing. So you fit in.
I fit in easily.
Yeah, you had them buffaloed.
Yeah.
And so I decided, and we had no communication during the war years, and I it ran parallel. I got a job at headquarters company as a dispatch writer, and then eventually, craving more excitement, I became a scout with the idea of getting some excitement. And I didn't have the cool head that you did. Matter of fact, we did run across each other one time, and you were afraid I was going to blow your cover, and you were trying to cover my escape. I was not, Buffalo Bill was not the most, how would you put it, intelligent with the way he gathered his information. Some of it was as bold and rash as riding right in front of their encampments or fortifications to get an idea of the number of guns and how alert they were, and then being chased over fields and jumping fences and being shot at all the time. You know, this was high fun, not realizing, you know, the seriousness or the consequences of had I been captured or had I been shot, because I was out of uniform. But high times. And again, that comes with an 18-year-old youth that's going to live forever.
Now, we're going to, since the clock is ticking right here, when did Buffalo Bill Cody, when did you get into the entertainment business?
Well, the Indians were mostly pacified up in the northern plains and west. There was still a thing to come with the Nez Perce and Chief Joseph, but the main combatants that I was scouting against with the 3rd, 5th, and occasionally 10th Cavalry, they were all subdued, if you will, and on reservations. And I had no knowledge of the Apache and the wars that were going on in the Southwest, nor did I know or understand desert, and had no desire to go there. And I was already married, had children, 2 daughters and a son at that time. So by 1872, things were peaceful on the northern plains. I'm casting about for work. General Sheridan is giving me the opportunity to take businessmen and senior officers on hunting trips to keep me on the payroll. Well, there was this fella, Edward Zane Carroll Judson, Ned Buntline to be short, that was his pen name. He had been writing pirate novels, dime novels about pirates. That was the most popular form of reading for the average American in those days. Excitement, the allure of the open oceans, buccaneers saving women and taking women against their will, you know, the whole 9 yards. A lot of action, a lot of fun, a lot of color. Well, he started to hear about me from these Eastern businessmen, and being astute and maybe being on the change, people are wanting to know more and more about the frontier. And wow, the Indian Wars are ending, so this could be the dawn of something new. And people back east were craving information in the newspapers. So he says, well, I'm going to write me a book about Buffalo Bill.
Mm.
And he wrote a book and it became an instant bestseller. He went out to near Fort McPherson there in Nebraska to meet with Cody and tell him that I want to write a play and starring you on stage. Well, Buffalo Bill was actually in those days a little shy and unassuming. He could spin a yarn around a campfire and drink with the best of them, and he wasn't intimidated by army brass or rich Easterners. But the idea of performing on stage absolutely frightened him, because one time a group of businessmen had invited him to New York, and they went to a play, and he was noticed, or they passed word, and they recognized him and asked him to come up on stage. It absolutely terrified him. He would rather face down 100 charging Sioux and all their regalia and their war whoops than to stand on the stage and talk to people.
I've heard that, yeah.
And so anyhow, when he's confronted by Ned Buntline to do a play, melodrama as they were called back then, he's going, oh man, I don't think so. Cody, if you do this, I will make you a rich man. Well, Cody says, no. Ned Buntline goes back to him again. Cody, I will make you a very rich man. No, can't do it. He tries a third time. Cody, I will make you an extremely wealthy man. Where do I sign? And Ned Buntline asked him to get together a cast, and who would he recommend? And Buffalo Bill, wanting to share his misery with others about performing, he had a good friend, Texas Jack Almohandro, and his wife, who happened to be an opera singer in Europe, and then in the off season, Merlucci. I can't.
Yeah.
Please forgive me, Texas Jack. I can't remember your wife's name. And she became the Indian princess in the play, Texas Jack and yourself. Well, Ned Buntline saw who I got lined up to help perform. He wrote himself into the play.
Yeah, there you go.
He wanted to be associated with all these, because who hadn't heard of Wild Bill Hickok, who from the earliest days of his being a marshal in Abilene and other places, that you were written about in the Atlantic Monthly, and people were starting to crave more about this 6'4", two-gun toting lawman, and so you were well known. I was gaining in reputation. Matter of fact, that reputation worked against me a little bit in my scouting days, because Custer was a few years older than myself, more than a few years, but he was a little jealous, because I scouted with him when the Archduke of Russia had come for a big hunt, and Custer and the cavalry were along as an escort and protection out on the prairies as we took this Grand Duke Alexis, I believe his name was, out on the prairies hunting grizzly bear, elk, everything that the West had to offer. And
hold that thought. We got 9 minutes. So whatever you can, you got 8 minutes. So whatever you can put in 8 minutes.
okay.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Well, anyhow, I got onto stage. I performed for 10 years. After a few years, Texas Jack, we were making money, but we couldn't make as much money having 3 big stars. So, and their little side note, Ned Buntline's part was minor, but during the interlude, and this is the hilarious thing of this, he was a drunkard, and he would give a temperance speech during intermission, and he's drunk up there on stage telling people about the evils of demon rum, and you shouldn't drink, it's terrible, it ruins lives, ruins families, just like today. But there was a certain amount of hilarity in the fact that this drunk is up there preaching to the public about drinking. So anyhow, Texas Jack went off on his own, tried to form a combination, as they were called. Theater groups were called combinations. And before he left, I had to fire you.
Yes.
You were causing so much ruckus and trouble.
Yes.
And
yes.
You just thought we were making a mockery of ourselves, portraying ourselves on stage, but with the stilted speech and the dramatic performances and gestures. And you were being heckled one time in particular in New York, and you walked to the edge of the footlights and challenged your hecklers to meet you in the hotel saloon right after the performance.
And that was 6 of those.
There were 6 of those
there
boys.
were 6 of them, yeah.
And you didn't know how many there were because of the lights, but you weren't afraid. So right after the performance, Texas Jack and I grabbed a table. You stood at the bar facing the doors waiting for the gentleman. Well, actually there were 4, I believe, initially, but they picked up reinforcements along the way, so there were 6 of them when they entered the saloon. And the fighting commenced, and Wild Bill thrashed each and every one of these guys, not singly, but in full-on rough and tumble, prairie style, kicking, gouging, biting, and no crying for mama.
I beat the hell out of these guys.
Yeah.
And there were 6 of them.
There were
6 to 1, and I beat the hell out of them. I feel pretty good about that.
And as proud of him as I may have been, and having noticed what condition the saloon was in when we entered it, and I didn't think it was the classiest bar I had been in, but I got presented with a $1,500 bill for damages. Now, I could have bought the building and all that it had, broken or not, for $1,500. But if I wanted to be able to leave the next day to go on to another town to continue our performances, in those days you engaged the theater for as long as you drew an audience. It wasn't, well, I want it for 6 performances, 2 weeks. Man, you were there 2 months if you packed the house every night. Well,
4 minutes.
Oh, 4 minutes. Okay, well, to wrap it up, I had to fire you shortly thereafter, after you left, and Texas Jack and I gave you a pair of pistols. You went to Deadwood, and
Got yourself
your
killed.
further fame, yeah. I didn't want to bring that up. I didn't know how you'd take it.
Yeah.
And I, at a 4th of July celebration at my, I was going to make my retirement home, Scouts Rest Ranch, in North Platte, Nebraska, decided to have a 4th of July blowout. Well, and I'd always had the idea of going off stage and doing things bigger in a bigger way. And in 1883, the concept came to fruition and on. And for the next number of years until 1913, performed in Europe and all over this country, and became probably one of the world's first superstars. And when Buffalo Bill died, the president and Buffalo Bill's widow received telegrams from heads of states, kings, chancellors, anything and everybody from overseas. He was extremely well known and loved, and it was a sorry passing. Nobody knows for sure if he wanted to be buried where he is or if he wanted to be buried in North Platte. The controversy continues. A little humorous note: before he took the show on the road, so to speak, and see, I fell into that trap, Buffalo Bill's Wild West on the road. While he was performing on stage, he tried in a small fashion to do these things, because there were people going to the West, sending teepees back and tomahawks and war bonnets, and having exhibitions, and people pay a quarter to go in and look at these things. Well, he tried to have a show with about 10 buffalo there in New York, because he was living in New York for a short period of time. Well, they didn't think about fences, folks. And herding 10 buffalo in an open field with people with their picnic baskets and blankets on the ground is sort of like herding a herd of cats north to Canada. It can be done, but it's extremely difficult. And it took them about 3 days to round up the last buffalo. So, a little humorous anecdote, and that's Buffalo Bill.
That's Buffalo Bill. And then we bring ourselves real quick to 2017. And this man right here is now on featured up in Main Street in Virginia City. He's created a whole bunch of interest, as you can imagine. You can look at his costume, and the way he talks, the way he presents himself is just absolutely top shelf stuff. And he has his own Buffalo Bill Wild West show or expedition this August 26th in Minden at the Dangberg Ranch. Now this is a sold out event, and last year was the first year, and it went so well. Now they made it an annual event. So if y'all
By public demand.
but yes, absolutely by public demand. So if y'all can make it, that's one event that you don't want to miss. August 26th at the Dangberg Ranch in Minden. All right. Now we have about 20 seconds. Any last words?
I'd love to see all my good friends and friends of Buffalo Bill and Doc Durden, Wild Bill Hickok, out there at the Dangberg and up here in beautiful downtown Virginia City.
Absolutely.
Please come on out and visit with us.
And thank you so much for tuning in again. I learned a hell of a lot today, and I think y'all did too. There's some stuff I really didn't know about, but we had a very interesting guest. He was absolutely seamless, don't you think? All right.
Thank you.
So I guess we're going to have to sign off because we are out of time. All right. Adios.
Adios. Do you have my check?
Coming in the mail.
In the mail. Pony Express, I bet.
And we're done. Excellent job.
Thank you very much.
That was. As a matter of fact, we're going to have to concentrate more on your character, because that was seamless and that was very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll short time it on beginning, and then we'll concentrate more on.
Well, and if you want to do future episodes, we
We
you
certainly
can
do
focus
that.
on
Well, yeah.
different-
I mean, there's so much
just
more.
on the Pony Express,
Yeah.
just on the
Sure.
stage performances
Sure.
and the anecdotes that go with that, and then the
No, this is
years-
not. Yeah, this is not your last time. Absolutely, I can't have this not go.
This would be like a
multiple
teaser.
times. Yeah.
this is a teaser.
Yeah. All right. Let me.
Thank you for having me, Doc. It was
Oh,
a pleasure.
No, I mean that. I'm thanking you for being here. For Christ's sake, this is.
And like Kim said, it's like talking with a friend. I tried to pay a little attention to the cameras and move and try and be animated, but it's just like sitting and talking with a friend.
And exactly right, and that's even if you don't know, I mean that's the reason why Michaela went so extremely well too. They really didn't know.